From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Well, thanks, Orly Barrett. Thank you very much. It's Monday, the 22nd of July, 2019. Hope you've had a great weekend. How are you? It's scorching here. It's Scorchio in Salford and Greater Manchester. This is your Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on Fab Radio 2, triggerwarning.tv, my own website, and multiple platforms as well. Great to be with you.
Richie Allen.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
It's a terrific day. I'm so excited about welcoming to the program Jason Bermas. What a legend Jason is. First heard of Jason way back in the day when the outstanding Loose Change documentary series of films was produced and released, examining September the 11th and asking questions about that day, a red letter day in history that the mainstream media was ignoring. He's a terrific guy. He's got a brilliant YouTube channel which we'll talk about, which he packs full of content on a daily basis. He's not just, of course, the man behind Loose Change, also documentaries like Invisible Empire, Fabled Enemies, Shade and more. Jason Bermas joins the program from New York City a little bit later on in the show. Hey, not too bad that. You can tweet me, it's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Let me know what you're thinking today. That's if you haven't melted. That's if you haven't melted, because you might have melted. You might just be a pool of goo. It's warm, and tomorrow it's going to be absolutely unbearable. Yeah. We'll soldier on. We'll soldier on. Top guests coming up for you this week. Great week kicking off with Jason. The former detective Maggie Oliver, the heroine herself, wonderful woman, will be on to talk about her book about grooming gangs and the part she played in bringing down grooming gangs in Rotherham and elsewhere. Maggie Oliver on the programme. In Rochdale, of course, Rochdale. Maggie Oliver on the programme tomorrow. Dean Henderson has got a new book out. Dean will be on the programme. Got a terrific week of shows lined up for you. So I do. You well? Good. You warm? You are? You warm? All right. You can go outside, you see. It's dull and windy, says Liz Jones. How you doing, Liz? I wish it was dull and windy. I'm Scorchio here. Little nod there to Caroline Ahern, the great comedian. Always say comedian. Hey, the Lib Dems have a new leader. Does it matter? Well, doesn't matter. The Liberal Democrats were, of course, having a leadership contest of their own. And former Energy Minister Ed Davey, who was an energy minister in the coalition government between the Lib Dems, of course, and the Conservative Party, 2010 to 2015. And he went up against Joe Swinson. And for the crack, here's the result, read out by some lady. I have no idea who she is.
And now, the result.
We've all been waiting for.
Is a record number of members voting in any Liberal Democrat leadership election.
Wow.
The number of ballots issued was 106,075.
Get on with it.
Votes cast, 76,429, giving us a turnout of 72%.
It's still a bit miserable though, isn't it? Over 30,000 people couldn't be arsed to pick a winner. Go on, who won?
Which matches another election we've had in the past, which was when Ming Campbell became leader.
Ming Campbell, that's Ming.
The votes for the candidates are as follows.
Come on,
Ed
love.
Davey, 28,021. Joe Swinson, 47,000.
Brilliant. Lovely. Yeah, there you are. That doesn't amount to much more than a hill of beans. It means the Liberal Democrats have, in their history, their first ever female leader. There you go. All right. Let's move on then to more important things. I look forward to your tweets. It's muggy in Cornwall, I'm being told. Lovely. How you doing, Paul, who says it's grey and overcast all day here. Gail is in Cornwall. Lovely. Hi to Charlotte in Burnley. How you doing, Charlotte? Hope you're well. It's time to move on. Lots to get through before we have Jason Bermas on the show. So let's do it. Let's get on with it. The Carl Beach trial has more or less concluded today. Sentencing to follow. But Carl Beach, the man dubbed as the VIP abuse accuser, has been found guilty today of making false claims. A convicted paedophile. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to read from the BBC. So I'm reading from the Beeb, right? I won't put this in my own words, my own vernacular. I'll read it from the Beeb. Just listen to this. A convicted paedophile has been found guilty of making false allegations of murder and child sexual abuse against a string of public figures. Carl Beach, 51, of Gloucester, was found guilty of 12 counts of perverting the course of justice and one of fraud. His lies led to a £2 million Metropolitan Police investigation, which ended in no arrests being made. Jurors at Newcastle Crown Court took a day to reach their verdicts following a 12-week trial. Former NSPCC volunteer Beach, who denied the charges, didn't react as the verdicts were delivered. He'll be sentenced on Friday. Of course, the NSPCC is National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. I'll read on. Beach had falsely claimed the ex-MP Harvey Proctor was directly involved in the murder of 2 boys, one of which also falsely implicated the former head of MI5, Sir Michael Hanley. Beach also fabricated a claim about another boy being deliberately run over, and that someone who might have been a missing teenager called Martin Allen had been killed in front of him. The Met investigation, which resulted from his allegations, that investigation called Operation Midland, closed without arrests or charges in March of 2016. Beach, who was nicknamed Nick by police, was later referred for investigation by Northumbria Police after a report into Operation Midland by retired High Court Judge Sir Richard Henriquez. Detectives then discovered Beach was himself a paedophile, and in January this year he admitted possessing hundreds of indecent images of children and voyeurism. Here's Harvey Proctor speaking shortly after the delivery of the verdict today. Former MP Harvey Proctor.
I have consistently maintained for myself and other public figures that we are innocent. Many are dead and cannot defend themselves, yet their names have been cruelly besmirched and their reputations traduced for over the last 4 years or more. If only the Metropolitan Police Service had conducted itself in a similar efficient and competent manner to Northumbria Police, the damage done by Mr. Carl Beach's criminality would have been drastically reduced and a real paedophile would have been apprehended sooner and children left unharmed.
Harvey Proctor. What's going on there? Well, the absolute truth of it is, of course, and you wouldn't expect me to say anything else, is that ultimately I don't know for a fact. I don't know. I did reach out to a couple of people today. I was hoping to have some comment because it's such a massive story, this, and I didn't manage to secure comment, but I will be talking about this on the programme tomorrow because it's hugely important. It's a running story, and the Independent Inquiry into Child Sex Abuse, of course, ICSA, as we know, Alexis J, that's ongoing. This is huge. Now, I reached out to Michael Shrimpton today. Now, I know a lot of my listeners find Michael to be very eccentric. Michael is the former barrister, very successful barrister, who maintained close relationships with a number of MI5 and MI6 assets. And he wrote a best-selling book, which is outstanding, called Spy Hunter. Michael spent a bit of time in prison, of course, and you'll know this, after he made claims that the German intelligence agency was going to maybe release a bomb or explode a bomb at the Olympics in London by way of doing false flag mischief. Very eccentric, as I said, Michael. But amid all the eccentricity, and I've known Michael Shrimpton for years, and the misdirection that you get with Michael, and I like the man, but you get a lot of misdirection with him. He's right over the target when it comes to the crimes of Edward Heath and others. And I said to Michael today, I had a brief chat with him, Skype chat, what do you think? And Michael said, well, I would believe that this man, Carl Beach, is a put-up job. In other words, get somebody like Beach, who has made all these claims. Maybe he has been induced to make all these claims, maybe. Again, I don't know, this is speculation. And use Beach's obvious lack of credibility, use the fact that it is easy to destroy him and his claims, use that as a way of obscuring the fact that paedophile rings run by some of the most important decision makers in parliamentary recent history not only have operated but continue to operate. And that's a great way of shutting down public interest in one of the biggest stories of our lifetime. And of course, after the Savile revelations, people all over the country who'd never dipped their toe or their finger into the alternative media began to find out that, yes, people had been talking about Edward Heath in the past. Yes, David Icke, for example, named Edward Heath in The Biggest Secret. And David Icke at that time was a household name. I'm not saying he is it now. I'm saying he was already a household name as a BBC presenter. And he'd done the Wogan show and he was a household name. And people used to say to me, Richie, Heath didn't sue Icke for libel only because it was obvious to everybody that Icke was some sort of nutter. Now, I used to take that seriously. What I mean by that is, even though I obviously had a lot of time for David and what David was doing and coming on my programmes and stuff, I looked at it and thought, well, it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that Heath dismissed David Icke's public challenge for Heath when Heath was alive to sue him for libel. You can't dismiss the idea that Heath was like, well, everybody thinks Icke's a nutter, there's no need to sue. But I don't believe that. I ultimately don't believe it. David was doing very well. He'd had a decade-long career at the top of the BBC. David had a few bob. And I think, I'm convinced that if there was nothing to the Edward Heath allegations made by victims to David Icke and subsequently published in David Icke's book and books, I believe that Heath would have sued him. I have no doubt that Heath had boys delivered from Haute de la Garenne children's home and brought to the yacht the Morning Cloud, and I now have no doubt that some of those children were murdered, not by Heath himself necessarily, but by state intelligence assets or personal protection people for Heath. Definitely threw some of those boys overboard, I have no doubt about that. None whatsoever. And I believe that this Carl Beach trial and story has been a wonderful bit of camouflage and misdirection to say to a public that has maybe a greater appetite than maybe it previously had for finding out what's really going on at the upper echelons of power. This story, this Beach story, is a way to say to people, look, this is fantasy and it is nonsense. And that's what Michael Shrimpton was saying to me today. And I'm going to get Michael on the programme tomorrow, because as much as anybody else, he knows what went on in Jersey, especially around Edward Heath, and we'll get into that again tomorrow on the programme. It's very important. Right, don't forget Operation Conifer, which was headed up by Chief Constable Mike Veal, formerly of Wiltshire Police, was an investigation that looked into the credibility of the allegations against Edward Heath. And Mike Veal, the Chief Constable of Wiltshire Police, concluded himself that the more than 40 witnesses who made statements about Edward Heath, the former UK Prime Minister, that they were credible, and that if Edward Heath was alive today, he would have to be interviewed under caution. That's a fact, Mike Veal. And I thought it was a bit strange that back in January of this year, Mike Veal quit his post with Cleveland Police, which he'd only been in for about 10 months, after he was accused of serious misconduct, and he was accused of making advances towards women. And I was very suspicious about that. Not because I'm a misogynist and I don't believe that men can behave inappropriately around women. Of course men do. But what an amazing thing to happen. Mike Veal says, I believe that Edward Heath had questions to answer. He headed up Operation Conifer. It was shocking what he concluded. The media harassed and harangued him all the way along, said he wasn't credible. They interfered with his investigation. And then after he released Operation Conifer, he's found to be accused of serious misconduct with women, and he ends up resigning from Cleveland Police. You know, you have to think, don't you? You have to think it's one of them.
All right, move on. Nothing to see here. Please.
Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here.
Please, man is all over what Edward Heath was probably doing with the protection of his personal protection officers and the intelligence agencies. Police officer dares to look into it, and eventually, well, he's forced to resign because he's accused of misconduct with women. Stinks to high heaven, dear listener. It's approaching 19 and a half minutes past the hour. This is your Richie Allen Show for Monday, July 22nd, 2019. So the Iranian state media released images of crew members on the British tanker that was seized in the Gulf. When we say British tanker, it was British flagged, right? Seized in the Gulf. The Iranians said, look, you've taken one of our tankers off the coast of Gibraltar. You will not release it back to us as you should do. So we're going to hold on to this tanker. So they released a bit of video footage, did the Iranians, and it showed cooks preparing meals on board and crew members being briefed by an Iranian official. So the government held a Cobra committee meeting today. Yes, very seriously, Cobra committee meeting to see what they would do about this. And they called the seizure by the Iranians of the tanker as unacceptable and highly escalatory. Highly escalatory. Who speaks like that? Morons. All right, if you want to criticise it, just say it's shite, isn't it? It's shite by the Iranians, you could say. But of course it isn't. The Iranians are looking after themselves and their own interests. Also today, Iran has claimed, and this is serious, that it arrested 17 spies. Now, some people have got the wrong end of the stick here. This isn't Americans working inside Iran. These are Iranians whom the Iranian government believes to be working for the CIA. So Iran said, we've arrested 17 spies. We're sure they work for the CIA, and they have sentenced some of them to death, which is very serious. Iran's intelligence ministry said the suspects were collecting information in vital sectors, including military and nuclear areas of activity. Donald Trump says it's fake news that CIA assets work in Iran. Iranian people are CIA assets. It's fake news, says Donald. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was on Fox News a very short time ago. He was first asked about the US response to the Iranian hijacking of the British flagged ship. So he's first asked about the hijacking, Mike Pompeo.
So the responsibility in the first instance falls to the United Kingdom to take care of their ships. But Brian, you know this story. This isn't because of American sanctions. This is because the theocracy, the leadership in Iran, their revolutionary zeal to conduct terror around the world for now 4 decades continues.
Of course, he's on Fox News. It wouldn't matter if he was on the BBC. Nobody's going to interrupt him. Iran has been conducting terror around the world for 40 years. No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't. You cannot name, and I would challenge even the Zionists who listen to this program religiously. How you doing, by the way? Provide me with any example of Iran conducting terror, in inverted commas, around the world. It just ain't so. Back to Mike Pompeo.
This is a bad regime. It's not
a bad regime.
The people of Iran, they've now conducted what amount.
He's laughing himself. Sometimes when you tell lies and they trip off your tongue, you laugh at your own lies. That's what Pompeo was doing there. He's laughing at his own lies, right?
What amounts to national piracy, right? A nation
National piracy.
taking over a ship that's traveling in international waters. This is the kind of behavior we've seen out of Iran for 40 years.
40 years again, yeah.
The United States has a responsibility to do our part, but the world's got a big role in this too, to keep these sea lanes open.
Sure.
I'm convinced we'll do that, and I'm ultimately convinced that the Iranian people will get the leadership behavior that they so richly deserve.
Mr. Secretary, do you think our lack of action 2 weeks ago has emboldened the Iranians? They think they can get away with anything because they got away with taking out a $200 million drone and saw very little repercussion.
Look, you gotta love Fox News, like. There's never been... What Fox News is, it's a collection of warmongers, with the exception of Tucker Carlson. What they do, Fox News, is they don't go to broadcasting colleges or journalism schools or colleges or universities. They go and they collect a bunch of people that happen to look very presentable, but believe in never-ending war, carnage, death and destruction. And they put them on television in front of the camera and they say things like that. Pompeo says, even though he's lying, we don't want war and we want to sort this out. And the Fox News guy says, well, maybe the Iranians were emboldened because we didn't bomb the shit out of them when they blew up that drone a couple of weeks ago. It's just incredible. This is what masquerades as journalism in 2019. What is Pompeo's response? What is his response? Come on, Mike.
No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think the leadership in Iran understands that America has the capacity to respond in ways that will protect American interests around the world. The president made the decision that he wanted to respond in a way that was restrained and prudent. I don't think Iran took this as a green light. I think I've seen intelligence that would indicate that. They understand that America is powerful. You've seen us move a few increased resources into the region. You've seen us respond in ways that are restrained. We don't want war with Iran. We want them to behave like a normal nation. Sure. I think they understand that. And
he laughed at the lies again. We don't want war. He started laughing at his own lies. I mean, it's pretty dim, that, isn't it? I mean, you'd have to ask, as a presenter, you would say, Mr. Secretary, why did you laugh when you said you didn't want war with Iran? That's basic presenting, that. Mr. Secretary, let me stop you. Why did you laugh when you said we don't want war with Iran?
And I think the whole world is waking up to the fact that this threat is real. It's not just a threat against America.
Yeah, it's not just a threat against America. So then he was asked about the CIA spies. Iran has arrested 17 people, Iranians, as I've already said. And Iran has said, look, they are working for the CIA. We have sentenced some of them to death. Okay, I don't like this, by the way. If you know anything about me, you know I don't like this. No time for capital punishment, me. So what did Pompeo say then on that?
I can't add much to it specifically, having had the chance to lead that great organization.
He's still laughing, isn't he?
Organization, the Central Intelligence Agency. I would urge everyone who's reading that story waking up to understand that the Iranian regime has a long history of lying.
The Iranian regime has a long history of lying. The Iranian regime has a long history of lying. The Iranian one now. The Iranian one, he said. Right? The Iranian one.
What kind of fuckery is this?
Yeah. WMDs, Mike? Anyone? WMDs? Anyone? Okay. What else did he say?
They lied about where they shut down the American UAV. They've now lied in the last few days about where they took down this tanker. It's part of the nature of the Ayatollah to lie to the world.
That's what the Ayatollah does. He just lies to the world. What do you do there, Khamenei? What do you do? I just tell lies to the world. I've got fuck all else to do in this palace, to be honest. So I just sit around just making up lies, porcupines. Fair enough.
I would take with a significant grain of salt any Iranian assertion about actions that they've taken.
So he's laughing his arse off as he's giving these answers.
So you don't believe that they have arrested these individuals? If these are Americans, we want to bring them home. We don't want them put to death, obviously.
If these are Americans, this is her blonde moment, and she is blonde. This is a bimbo pretending to be a fucking journalist on Fox News. A fucking bimbo. It's obvious. It was announced this morning they were Iranian people that were arrested. Listen to fucking bimbo here.
Americans, we want to bring them home. We don't want them put to death. You don't believe that they have arrested these individuals. If these are Americans, we want to bring them home. We don't want them put to death, obviously.
Oh, God. If they're Americans, we want to bring them home. We don't want them to be put to death, obviously. Come on. Yeah. Unbelievable. If these are Americans, we don't want them to be put to death. We want them brought home. They're Iranians, you daft bint.
Ainsley, there are many Americans that have been held, detained inside the Islamic Republic of Iran.
He left her away with that, didn't he? He left her slide there. If I had been Pompeo, I would have annihilated her. I would have said, listen, biatch. What makes you think they're American?
Far back as Bob Levinson. So there's
Bob Levinson. Oh, God. I think the sun has gotten to your presenter today.
a long list of Americans that we are working to get home from the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a nation, as I talked about before, for 40 years has behaved in ways that normal nations don't. You don't take other country citizens and hold them hostages for political gain. I think this is...
You don't take other people's citizens as hostages. Hang on now. You don't take the citizens of other countries hostages for political gain.
What kind of fuckery are you?
Have you ever been to Guantanamo Bay, Mike? Just a question. You ever heard of Guantanamo Bay? No. Where guys were handed over by the Northern Alliance. When your soldiers, Mike, told people in Afghanistan that if they fingered Al-Qaeda operatives, they would get thousands of dollars in cash rewards. And they just started accusing everybody. It was like the Salem fucking witch trials, Mike. They were basically pointing at people and going, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, and they were getting $2,000. The Northern Alliance. You remember that, Mike? And many of these people ended up in Guantanamo Bay, Mike. Kidnapping people for political gain, Mike. Are you having a laugh, Mike? Mike Pompeo there. Of course, he's on Fox News. It's 5:30, 5:30 on the Richie Allen Show. How you doing? You well? The heat is getting to me. The heat is on. The heat is on now. 44 degrees in the studio. We'll have a giggle before we go back to more serious news. Let's talk about man-spreading. That terrible thing that men do when they sit down, they stick their legs out and show off their crotch. We sit down. We sit down on tube. That's about 5 accents there in the one. And we spread our legs. And it annoys women. It particularly annoys feminists, apparently. Yes. University of Brighton student Layla Laurel, mentioned this last week, won a top award, a designer award, because she designed a chair that stops man-spreading. Do you remember this? She designed a chair. And she's had death threats, apparently, on Twitter. Some men are so annoyed at the idea that somebody would be offended by their man-spreading that they've taken to Twitter to threaten to kill her. Death threats are all the rage on Twitter these days. Morons, keyboard warriors. Anyway, she was on Sky News this morning and it made me laugh. Here's the feminist who designed the anti-man-spreading chair. Her name is Layla Laurel. I thought you might want to hear a bit of this. This is good. The designer of the man-spreading chair, the feminist.
Yeah, so I was trying to kind of employ my perspective as a young female designer to kind of like highlight and challenge some of the sexist issues in our society at the moment. So yeah.
Sexist issues like a guy sitting down and getting comfortable and opening his legs.
I thought, given that I'm kind of working with design and it's trying to find like solutions to things in society, I thought...
Solutions to things in society, yeah. We were crying out for a man-spreading chair, of course.
I thought it'd be interesting to work with the idea of man-spreading. Whether you're a man or a woman, you've probably experienced someone taking up your space.
Yes, and I usually say, oi, fatty, get your fucking leg off of my chair. Right? I think the heat is killing me.
And it's something that I feel really frustrated at. And I know that, the women that I've spoken to or the testimonies I looked at on the Everyday Sexism Project are frustrated at it. So, I think drawing attention to those, intrinsic problems of the space we take up and the way we move through the world is, interesting and important.
Intrinsic space we take up, interesting and important, the space as we move through the world. Jesus Christ. Pretentious? What? Anyway, is there a question here? Can one of the presenters save us?
Yeah, because it does speak to something more than just being rather insensitive to people that are sitting next to you on public transport, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, it's potentially indicative of a wider problem, but I think also it's just annoying. Last week I saw a woman having to sit with her legs in the aisle because a man was, completely across her seat. And
That bastard, she had to sit with her legs in the aisle. Why didn't you just say to him, hey, listen, pal, move over there, will you? before I take me stiletto and stick it up your arse. That's all she had to say, and he probably would have moved.
And that's just frustrating.
And is that to do...
This is some question. Wait till you hear this.
The power dynamic? Is it to do with men generally being quite pig ignorant when they come to sitting in public transport? Is it to do with women not feeling like they can turn around and tell a man to stop being so pig ignorant?
You know, I think there's a myriad of problems around it, and I think, you know, sometimes it's not even a conscious thing. I don't think these, you know, man-spreaders is like something that's always like super negative or like assertive, but I think occasionally, you know, it is a microaggression. And I've, you know, heard stories from women where it turns into something that's actually far more aggressive and like, you know, confrontation.
Yeah, it's a microaggression that can turn into something that's even more aggressive. What kind of are you? Do you know what we're going to do now? We're going to take a bit of music. I want to welcome back my great friend Jean-Anne Crowley, who has been Sean's laptop for a while. Sean's laptop. And she's back in the game, Jean-Anne. Great friend of mine. She's listening in today. How you doing, our kid in the west of Ireland? This is the Richie Allen Show. And I'm playing this for Jean-Anne because I know she likes a bit of Rod Stewart. I know she does. Don't we all? Don't we all like a bit of Rod Stewart, eh? I bet you Rod did a bit of man-spreading in his time. Go on, Rod. This is the Richie Allen Show, by the way. Can't wait for Jason Bermas a bit later on. Can't wait for him. Back in a couple of minutes with more chat. Right, that's Rod and Baby Jane on the Richie Allen Show. The time is 22 minutes to the top of the hour. It's Monday's programme. And we're all getting a little bit mad in the heat. Couple of quick stories for you. There's a company in London called Moonshot. It's called Moonshot, and it hasn't got anything to do with space or space travel. It's a company that deals in software, and the software makes sure that people see the correct information online. Yeah. So Moonshot is going to be used to stop anti-vaxxers spreading dangerous myths. I can't say... How do you say myths? Myths. M-Y-T-H-S. Myths. Anyway, Moonshot is going to get involved, and it's going to make sure that you no longer see dangerous stuff about anti-vaccination on Tinternet. It's a software company, and it's very successful, apparently. It's been used in the past to prevent people joining ISIS. I nearly joined ISIS. If it wasn't for Moonshot, I would have been over there, to be honest. It started bombarding me with anti-ISIS messages just as I was about to get on the plane. Yeah, the plane. I was on the way to the plane. And I saw some Moonshot stuff. So they spot at-risk people through online searches or social media posts. So Moonshot is brilliant, basically. It will see, because it sees everything, artificial intelligence and everything, it will notice if you're engaging with a lot of stuff that's anti-vaccination, and it will interject and stop you seeing that stuff, and it will correct you. Like the caretaker at the Overlook Hotel said this before in The Shining. I had to correct them, sir. So you'll be corrected, and you will only get the right information, because as we all know, vaccines are safe, are healthy, are brilliant. We all need them, and most of us are not getting enough vaccination. Let's be honest about it. So Moonshot's based in London, works in 28 countries around the world. And this is what my friend Hayden Hewitt would say is shit getting real. Israel continues to bulldoze Palestinian people's homes, by the way. Happens all the time. Happens every day of the week and twice on Sunday. And you never hear about it. Why the BBC decided to report on this today, I have no idea. But Israel just began this morning demolishing another block of Palestinian homes, leaving people homeless and women and children screaming and crying in the dirt as all they have is just destroyed by the illegitimate apartheid racist state of Israel. The Nazi emulators themselves, just destroying homes, laughing while they're doing it. This is in Sur Bahar, by the way, which is on the edge of East Jerusalem. Why did Israel do it? Well, they just do it. Sometimes they give an excuse, other times they don't. They want to eradicate the Palestinians. They want to basically obliterate them. It's genocide. Today they said that the houses were built too close to the barrier. There you are. So we'll just demolish these homes and fuck these people and the horse they rode in on, basically. Israel's Supreme Court says, yeah, no problems, yeah, just go and destroy those houses and render those people homeless. Yeah. Lovely, eh? Lovely. Why the BBC decided to do something on it today, I have no idea. But they did. I report on it as much as I can. It is genocide. It's genocidal behaviour by the eternal whingers about genocide. Nobody whinges more than Zionists about genocide. And yet they do to the Palestinian people what they bitch about being done to Jews in Germany. Of course Jews were scapegoated and murdered in Germany. Of course they were. And what they do now, the Israelis, is they scapegoat, torture and try to wipe out the Palestinians. It's exactly the same thing. There's no difference. They do the same thing. They brainwash the children in Israeli schools. They force them to spend a couple of years in the Israeli Defence Forces, where they are further brainwashed. And then they just knock down their houses. These are real people, by the way. I'm not trying to be on a soapbox here. These Palestinians, these are real people, flesh and blood people. They bleed, they cry, they have runny noses, they change nappies just like we do. These are real people on their land. People are asking on Twitter today, when are we going to sanction? We're never going to sanction them. This country won't touch them. Look at Jeremy Corbyn, tail between his legs, running away. Run away, Jeremy. Run away from the Zionists. Nobody's going to touch them. I'm going to do a little segment later in the week where I'm going to read out the names of Jewish journalists working in the UK media in senior positions in the broadsheet media and in senior positions in national and commercial radio and television. And you're not going to believe your ears. And this is the reason why there's no condemnation of it. It's dreadful. Imagine it happening to you. Somebody coming along and bulldozing your house. Oh, you're too close to us, we don't like you. There's a protest going on tonight against the conditions faced by employees of Amazon in Bristol. It isn't the first such protest now. There's been a few, and there were others last week. The Union for Amazon Workers is GMB, and they're holding a demonstration at the company's distribution centre beginning at 5:30 p.m. today, so it's already been going on for 17 minutes. The conditions are dreadful for Amazon workers. Dreadful. Workers at the warehouses are forced to endure unsafe working conditions and dehumanising work. Some workers even have to urinate in plastic bottles, while pregnant women are forced to stand for several hours. This is all true, by the way. It's not just a bunch of whinging employees. It's true. There was an expose of this in Essex back in 2017. You might remember there was a 5-week investigation. These conditions are absolutely brutal. Amazon, that's done as much as anybody else to destroy the high street, to destroy the local green grocer, the local fishmonger. There's a local butcher, local shops where you would have bought books and stuff and other things. Not anymore. You go on Amazon now, don't you? Of course you do. Destroying everything, and in the process treating people like cattle. So in Bristol tonight they're saying, to hell with that, we're not having it anymore. Good for them. What do you make of this situation in Canada, in British Columbia, where this Jonathan Yaniv, who now calls himself Jessica Yaniv, Jonathan has basically sued or taken human rights abuse cases against some women who don't want to wax his tallywhacker and his little curly things. You must have been following this. I mentioned it this morning on the thingamajig. What do we call that? The chat, the YouTube live chat. So this Jessica Yaniv, formerly Jonathan Yaniv, said that I was discriminated against based on my gender identity. So basically Jessica, who doesn't look like a woman and has a tallywhacker in his knickers, went to, how do you pronounce this? What are they called? The people who do that sort of work. There's a name for it. I'll think of it. Esthetician. Wow. So Jessica, with the hairy tallywhacker, filed complaints against 15 estheticians because they didn't want to touch his genitalia. Yeah. And the worst of it is, Jessica is winning the battle in British Columbia, in Canada. This is true. According to the Post-Millennial, some of these women are going out of business because the cost of defending themselves against this lunacy is upwards of $20,000 a pop. Man rocks up, says I'm a woman, whacks out the cock and balls and says, you've got to wax me. The woman goes, no, I only treat women. The man who thinks he's a woman goes running, screaming to a solicitor, and before you know it, they're saying it's an abuse of human rights. Yeah. Because it's mad, isn't it? And one of the women, who's a woman called De Silva, who's had to close her business, Marcia De Silva, has had to close her business. This is true now. Run out of money, right? So this business is gone. A woman, she probably had a couple of employees as well. So this man who thinks that he's a woman, Jessica Yaniv, said that the closing of De Silva's business was a win for human rights. Mad, huh? 13 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. 'Tis mad. And 'tis only madder 'tis getting. Darren says... Darren, how you doing, Darren? He says, Richie, Amazon workers, I know firsthand that women employees are forbidden from operating heavy machinery, example forklifts, etc. This is in the Rugeley, Staffordshire Fulfilment Centre. It baffles me, says Darren. Yeah, but the pregnant women, Darren, were complaining that they were forced to be on their feet for long hours. They couldn't take breaks or sit down for fear of getting behind. It's not about heavy machinery as far as I understand. There you go. Hi to Faisal. How you doing, Faisal? Nice to hear from you. Hi to Thought Criminal. Thanks for listening to the Richie Allen Show. Hi to Ruby Dragon. Susan, how you doing, Susan? Samantha Jordan, how you doing, Samantha? Alan Badger, how you doing, Alan? How you doing? Patricia in Zurich in Switzerland, how you doing, Patricia? Andy Newman is listening as well. Follow what other people are saying on Twitter by putting Richie Allen Show into Twitter, all one word, and see what other people are tweeting to me. Yeah. Jean is back on to tell me about Rod Stewart. He did a great rendition of Grace, a very poignant song about the night Grace Gifford married her beloved in jail before Joseph Plunkett was taken out to be shot. That's right. And I remember Jim McCann singing that, Jean. That's a beautiful song, that. I'm not going to butcher it now. I won't butcher it, but the chorus is beautiful. Oh, Grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me out at dawn and I will die. Great bit of Irish history. Not a great bit, but inspirational for some Irish people, I suppose. Thanks for that. I'll look for that, Rod Stewart singing that. Brendan Grace, of course, who was a comedian, great comedian who died last week, sadly. Great actor as well. Brendan used to sing from time to time, and I've heard Brendan Grace sing that song as well. Also a very talented guy, Brendan Grace. May he rest in peace. Aryesh Day, Garev Anam, died last week. I marked his passing on the chat on YouTube because he's a great guy. So there you go. All right. Are you looking forward to hearing Jason Bermas shortly? Are you looking forward to... I can't wait to hear Jason. Because when I saw Loose Change when it came out, it blew my mind. And then subsequent editions were released of Loose Change, and it was just a fantastic series of films where these brilliant filmmakers and producers did the job of the mainstream media and poked 1,000,005. I counted, it was 1,000,005 holes in the 9/11 Commission report and the official version of what happened. Great guy, Jason. I'm really glad to be making his acquaintance, and he's going to join us live from New York in a few minutes' time. It's 9.5 minutes to the top of the hour. Final story in the news roundup. There are more protests against the teaching of sex education, but sex education that talks about same-sex couples. There are more protests, and these protests have gone to Nottingham and to a primary school near Woollerton in Nottingham. And there's a protest this morning by concerned parents, and the protest was then followed by a counter-protest where LGBT activists turned up to protest the protest. Good thing was, they seemed to be chatting to one another. There wasn't any violence or any hateful language or any threats or any of that. some of the mostly Asian families who were protesting in Nottingham did engage the LGBT people to say to them, listen, it's not about you or what you do. We just don't believe that our 4 and 5-year-olds should be asked to think about these complex issues at their age. They shouldn't be asked to do it. So anyway, Nottinghamshire police said they were monitoring this situation. Now, David Mellon, that's Melllen, David Mellon, is the leader of Nottingham City Council, and he was on Sky News this afternoon. What did David Mellon have to say about this?
Well, we hope this is a one-off protest. The people protesting outside the school, most of whom were not parents at the school, were seeming to make a variety of points. One was about the inclusion of LGBT relationships in relationship and sex education, but also the undue sexualisation of children, which they also claim is happening, which has no basis in fact whatsoever. So we are engaging in various levels of communication with this small group and trying to persuade them not to protest again. Schools will be breaking out later this week anyway.
Yeah, so some of the protesters who are against the teaching of same-sex relationships in schools say they are only protesting as a last resort. They attempted to speak to counsellors, but they've been forced into this position.
Yes, because 4 and 5-year-old children are too young to be thinking about this stuff. This isn't a bigoted or not a bigoted, a bigotry or a homophobia issue at all. It's like, leave them be children. Some of them will figure out their sexuality. Some of them will be gay. Most will be straight. Some will be gay. And maybe 1 in 1,000 will feel they're in the wrong body. Let them figure it out by themselves. So he says to the Nottingham City Council leader, the parents said they weren't consulted. It's a bit young for the kids to be dealing with this position. Right?
That's not true. I spoke to some of the protesters last week, and this has been a measure that's been brought in by government, and it's been passed through the House of Commons with support on all sides. The schools are open to parents coming to see the materials that are going to be used in teaching this with their children. There are plenty of avenues for people who are parents of the children who are going to be receiving this education to have their fears addressed and their questions answered.
My understanding is that you yourself are a former head teacher and a former teacher. How damaging is this for the young kids attending the school?
That's a ridiculous question. I said this on Sunday View and I said it last week. It's ridiculous. What they're trying to do here is say that protest is dangerous for children. Children shouldn't witness protest. Wonderful. Wonderful bit of fuckery going on, really, when you think about it, because you've got this notion that, well, children might be nervous when they see the protest, but you can look at that from another point of view. Let's make sure that children never see that people have a right to conscientiously object to something they believe to be wrong. Let's get that idea out of the children's heads very quickly.
School.
I think what we don't want to get to is a stage where the protests are happening or any further protests are happening when the children are coming into or out of school. That didn't happen this morning in Woollerton, and for which we're grateful. But schools have been teaching relationship and sex education for many years.
They have been for many years, but ordinarily you don't come across it until you're in high school. I would have been 13 doing biology in high school, in secondary school in Waterford City. 13, 14. Obviously, we knew about the birds and the bees at that age, of course. You know, the street tends to tell you stuff, right? But you get the formal education when you're about 13, 14. So we know it's being taught in schools. You want to teach it to 4 and 5-year-olds, but you want to focus on this whole equality nonsense and tell children about same-sex relationships. And the parents say, no, they're too young.
I was doing it 30 years ago in primary schools in Nottingham. The curriculum has changed very little. It's giving children the information that they need at an age-appropriate level and ensuring that we manage to allow children to understand what's happening to their own bodies, what's happening to others, and enabling healthy relationships as they grow up. is part of a respectful city where we celebrate diversity and we culture respect here, one for the other, and education is really important as part of that.
Yeah, we culture respect here and all that old garbage. We'll just leave that. Hey, before we wind up the news and we get Jason Bermas on, can't wait for Jason. I had a bit of a giggle this morning. Rory Stewart is the current Secretary of State for International Development. He also ran in the Conservative Party leadership contest and didn't get very far. He doesn't like Boris Johnson very much. Rory Stewart was interviewed this morning by LBC's James O'Brien, who, you might argue, is an insufferable gobsheen. An insufferable gobsheen is James O'Brien. There was a laugh out loud moment when James O'Brien asked Rory Stewart to tell us all how dangerous he thinks Boris Johnson is. How dangerous is he? Rory Stewart's pause is pregnant, to say the least. This made me laugh this morning because I have a ridiculous sense of humour. I've told you this before. How dangerous is he? And Rory Stewart has to think about it. It's quite comical, really. You ready? You ready?
How dangerous do you think he is?
Come on, Rory. It's not Hamlet. Come on, kid.
I think he's just... I think the danger is the lack of detail, the lack of anything particular. It's the sort of vagueness, the abstraction, the blandness of it that worries me. I literally don't know what happens on the 31st of October or the 1st of November. I can't plot his path. I mean, my mind works by trying to sort of do a little decision tree and think, I don't see how he gets no deals through Parliament. I don't see how he can deliver something that can simultaneously please Amber Rudd and Mark Francois. I don't get it.
He doesn't get it, apparently.
So, I mean, he's not dangerous in the sense that he's some kind of 1930s figure. It's just that
Well, I'm glad you haven't said he's a fascist. Not that I have any time or interest in Boris Johnson. I have none. Glad you don't think he's a fascist. The only person Boris Johnson is a danger to, really, in terms of being a physical danger, are young boys who play football and rugby. Have you seen some of those clips on YouTube where Johnson, when he was the mayor of London, goes to a school and just assaults children, bangs the shit out of children playing rugby and football? A complete goon, Boris Johnson. Right, we're going to leave the news roundup there. I tell you what, dear listener, it's bad today. I'm all right now, but you should have seen me last week. God be with Rodney Dangerfield, what a legend. Today, it's sweltering. Tomorrow, it's going to be horrendous. But I've got a fantastic show lined up for you tomorrow. Maggie Oliver joins the programme. I've been reading Maggie's book today, and I'll finish it tomorrow. You don't want to miss that. This is your Richie Allen Show. What's going on? Oh, yeah, Jeopardy is still playing you. All right. Richie, you couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery. Let's have some Oasis. The Gallagher brothers. They say Gallagher over here because they're Fenians, you see. It's Gallagher. This is Whatever on the Richie Allen Show, approaching 6 o'clock for Monday, July the 22nd, 2019. And my name is Richie Allen, by the way. I love you. Thanks for listening. Back in a couple of minutes with Jason. Yeah, Oasis and Whatever on the Richie Allen Show. We're coming up for 3 minutes past 6, Monday's programme. Hundreds of tweets. By the way, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show. You can tweet to your heart's content, and you can follow what other people are tweeting as well and engage them in a bit of conversation. I'm really thrilled about meeting my guest this hour because I can honestly say without even a trace of pretension that he changed my life. He really did. Around about the time that I was leaving commercial radio in Ireland back in 2002, 2003, into 2004, and thinking about September the 11th and that, I saw his film, Loose Change, the film that he produced with his friends, which I think has been seen now hundreds and hundreds of millions of times by people around the world. It's an extraordinary series of films, and like I said earlier on, they did the job of the mainstream media in poking holes in the ridiculous story about the September the 11th attacks. It was terrific. And he's not just known for that. He's made films as well, like Invisible Empire as well, Fabled Enemies and Shade. He's brilliant. You can follow him on YouTube because he reports on his channel daily and sometimes several times a day. His YouTube channel is youtube.com/InfoWarrior. I recommend you follow him there and watch him. youtube.com/InfoWarrior. It's a genuine pleasure for me to welcome to the program Jason Bermas. Jason, thanks for giving us your time, my friend. And I meant every word of that. Thank you for being you. Welcome to the program.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. I mean, that was quite the intro. I'm glad to do it. And, I'm so happy that I'm able to post now 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a day on my main channel with highly produced videos, breaking news, things that you're not seeing in the mainstream media, and most importantly, connections that are either being ignored or very much downplayed, even with big headline stories such as, Iran right now and, of course, the Epstein case.
You're brilliant, Jason. You've got something that, not many journalists have. You've got a memory like an elephant. And it's really important because I watch you on your channel and you're on the hop and you're interacting with people on your live chat and you recall facts and figures and dates and things that happen in history like lightning, and I'm like, wow, this guy knows his stuff, and I'm really impressed with it. So that's genuine praise. I'm thrilled to bits. And when we moved to Spain, my partner and myself in 2005, and Loose Change, we used to get DVDs of Loose Change, ones that we'd gotten, some of which we'd paid for, others which we just had, and we would put out there and we would show them to people and invite people around. Your films changed the lives, mate, of hundreds of millions of people. They really did. And that's absolutely wonderful. There's lots we can talk about. Let me ask you, because I've always wanted to ask you this. When you made Loose Change and the follow-up films with when information came out, so you had the second edition and the final editions, with the success of them, because hundreds and hundreds of millions of people watched them, did you think, right, this is it, this is going to blow the lid off it and it's going to change the world and they're going to have to admit that they duped us all? What were your hopes when the film was so viral?
Yeah, certainly on the run-up to the 5th anniversary of 9/11 and, just before the release of the final cut, because I came on pre-second edition. Dylan had done the first edition, which really hadn't gone viral because we didn't have the opportunity, I guess. If you look, Google Video wasn't around. YouTube was a completely different animal, if it even existed at that point. I mean, 10-minute videos, poor quality, etc. You really had to torrent. And I actually watched the original edition. And, a long story how I ended up hooking up with those guys. But I truly, I believe in the law of attraction because, I just had a passion for this stuff. So we come in and I thought right then, after seeing the first edition, as we were making this movie, that we were going to change the world. Yeah. And they were kind of looking at me like, we're going to sell a couple DVDs, et cetera, et cetera. I said, no, it's going to be so much bigger than that. And really, because of guys like you, people like you that did what we asked, took the DVD or the digital file wherever you could find it, burned copies, handed them out to people. By the 5th anniversary, we were down there with 10,000 copies, probably more than 10,000 people. We ran out of copies of that film so quick. And Investigate 9/11 T-shirts to the point where, the mainstream media couldn't even cover the 5th anniversary on the ground because we were swarming it. I was booked. I was booked for Glenn Beck that day when he was still on CNN. To go up against James Meggs. And earlier in the day, Dylan and I took on James Meggs and David Dunbar of Popular Mechanics. And to this day, I still think I eviscerated them. And I got canceled on Glenn Beck later in the day. It's had a lasting impact. I wanted so much more. I believed so much more. I really thought that this was a chance to take down what I consider the cabal. The more and more these news stories come out, for instance, the intelligence connections now with Epstein, the fake passport, Vicky Ward saying he had an association with Adnan Khashoggi in the 1980s. Well, hey, The 1980s, Adnan Khashoggi was running the arms through Israel. Basically, they would pick up arms from Czechoslovakia and Poland. The Israeli intelligence would get their hands on them, brokered by Khashoggi. They would ship them down to the Contras. We then would ship up cocaine and marijuana to Mena, Arkansas, Florida, and then distribute it there. And then all the funding through this would go through BCCI banking. And BCCI banking is also laundering the money for the Mujahideen and the Bin Laden network at the time. You know, this cabal really hasn't changed much. If anything, it's just evolved.
It's evolved, Jason. Talk to us then about what's happening with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of people who followed paedophile rings and people who are convinced that at the very upper echelons of political power and industrial power, people who believe that paedophile rings are the norm, they're very excited about this. I know you met David Icke many years ago, and David was very fond of your films, Jason, and he wrote some books about Edward Heath and others, the former UK Prime Minister. So a lot of people are excited. They think that maybe that Epstein is in custody, maybe he's out on bail now, that maybe with the charges against him pending, he might spill the beans and he might blow the lid off the whole thing. Are they being a bit optimistic, people, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, 3 weeks ago, had you told me Jeffrey Epstein would be in a jail cell or arrested, I wouldn't have believed you, number one. Number two, the judge has kept him. And we went over the letter that Jeffrey Bermas sent to them and then the judge's response. That's something I really like to do on the channel because you get these sound bites on the news. Well, we'll spend 25 minutes, reading the indictment and showing you exactly what these things are about. I don't think he's going anywhere. Now, the question is he going to roll on people? Well, if what, again, Vicky Ward is reporting on Acosta is true, when Acosta was coming in to the Trump administration as the labor secretary, he was asked why he gave Epstein this deal. And he said that he was told it was above his pay grade and that Epstein was intelligence.
Jason, do us a favour. Sorry to interrupt you, my friend. Remind our listeners, let's not, you've got a big, massive brain on you. I love this. Let's not assume knowledge because some of our listeners won't know some of this. So talk about the deal that Acosta gave to Jeffrey Epstein before becoming Labour Secretary.
So what I would advise people to do is James Patterson is a world-famous author. In fact, in this country, he's the best-selling author in the world, surpasses Stephen King. And he's normally writing fictional novels. Yeah. Well, he happened to live in Palm Beach where this scandal broke out, where initially a girl who was 14 years old blew the whistle on what would become this ring of Jeffrey Epstein, his main procurer, Ghislaine Maxwell, and others recruiting young girls basically to be molested and then recruit other young girls. 30 plus victims come forward. Everybody assumes, even with this sweetheart deal, that Epstein had to plea down to this 14-year-old. And it turns out she was 16. That's a whole other issue. James Patterson wrote a nonfiction novel with 3 investigators about this case. So if you really want the nitty-gritty on the Palm Beach connections, on the Trump connections to Mar-a-Lago, which are very real, and even then he was reporting about the falling out that now some of the witnesses, I shouldn't call them witnesses, victims, are talking about. That's where that comes from. I believe Jane Doe number 102, Jane Doe number 43, and others. So in this deal, which is just incredible, first of all, it declares not only immunity from prosecution from Epstein if he completes what's a vacation in not jail, because when he shows up to jail, he gets to leave on work release. It's now come out that he was, having sex with escorts during that time period in his quote unquote office. I mean, this deal is nightmarish. Then all of his associates get immunity for crimes that they are not even able to talk about. Well, the vast majority of these documents are sealed for years. And then in the subsequent lawsuits, those documents are also sealed. So recently we had a judge say in just one of those cases that they'd be unsealing about 2,000 pages. This was about a week prior, not even, I think a few days prior to Epstein finally getting picked up on totally separate charges, by the way, from Florida. Okay. And these stem from New York, 2002, I believe, to 2005, and that operation. But you got to understand, this guy had properties in New Mexico, in New York, in San Antonio, in Florida. He was coming back from France, in London, you name it. This is an international op. And, we could go on about the bizarre nature of this whole thing, but just through those documents being unsealed, I think it's going to start unravel, because we talked about an intelligence connection, Richie, but what I've really been delving into is how long was this guy on the quote unquote Trilateral Commission? I've now confirmed that at least from 1995 to 2008, and Vicky Ward claims 2011. Now, 2008, his crimes are well known at this point, and he's still at the Trilateral Commission. This is a powerful, powerful man.
This is a Rockefeller Round Table group, isn't it? The Trilateral Commission. And why would this guy be on the commission? I mean, Epstein's his career is interesting enough in terms of how he got his money, but you wouldn't have imagined him being on a group like that, or being involved with a so-called think tank like that. It's even more bizarre, that, Jason. I can't figure that out.
Yeah, it's very hard for me to understand. Is this guy gaining intel? Is he seed funding for intelligence organizations? Is he co-opting people there? One of the very stunning things. I'm not God. I don't remember everything. I appreciate you saying that. My mind's like as good as it is. But one of the things I found here is through the Rockefeller Archive. I found out that in 1972, it was actually Brzezinski and David Rockefeller that came up with the Trilateral Commission, because they were on their way to the Bilderberg meeting in a plane, and the other executive board members didn't want to allow Japan to come to these meetings. So Rockefeller said, you know what, I'm just going to set up another group. We'll have our elitists come in, and we'll also invite the Japanese elite in there as well. So I'm constantly learning too. And I need more people to dig into this stuff, because the Trilateral Commission is a very powerful group. This guy was invested everywhere. Harvard University, he was investing, he was given to charities such as Elton John's charity. He had a cabin at a school for basically young girls, his own private cabin. I mean, the connections this man had, the charities he was involved in, the politicians that took money from him, his business associates like Khashoggi. This isn't just, molesting dozens and dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of girls. This is very well an intelligence operation that dates back to the 80s.
It dates right back to the 80s. Jason Bermas is our guest today. Delighted to have Jason on the programme. Info Warrior on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. I know that many of our listeners are well aware of who Jason is, so I don't have to play Jason up at all. It's great to have him on the programme. Jason, Johnny Vedmore is an investigative journalist here in the UK. Lovely fella, Johnny. I interviewed him last week, and he's really good. He's written an article which has appeared on The Swamp.media, about Epstein's association with a woman called Nicole Junkerman, who's connected with the Israeli State Intelligence Service, Mossad. And she's part of a company called Carbine. Well, she's a big investor in a company called Carbine. And they're doing something which most American people won't know. You may very well know yourself, but most people won't know. They're working on an app, a call handling app, that so say that when it's rolled out, people in New York or in Delaware or in Massachusetts, they wouldn't phone 911 to report an emergency. They would let the Carbine app do it. And this Carbine app is run basically by former Israeli intelligence people. She's involved in it. She's connected to Epstein. And the worst of it is, they would then begin live streaming your emergency and dealing with it for you, but gathering reams and reams and reams of data on you and on your environment, and all of it going straight to former Israeli intelligence people. Would you believe it? Jason, it's scary stuff. And this woman is intimately connected to Epstein. Nicole Junkerman is her name. She's involved in trying to get her fingers, her hands on the National Health Service here in England as well. So this stuff is multifaceted, Jason, isn't it? It goes way beyond just Epstein flying around in a plane and abusing children. It goes way beyond that.
Yeah, there's a couple of great points there. First of all, I'm going to have Johnny on later today in about 4.5 hours.
Oh, brilliant. I'm delighted. That's wonderful news now. Great stuff,
yeah,
Jason.
This is a great article, and this is really just one of the Israeli Mossad connections. If you look at, first of all, you were talking about data collecting and intelligence. In my film Fabled Enemies, I have a 20-minute section where not only do we go over the intelligence network of the art students and the dancing Israelis, but Amdocs and Converse, who then were handling all the phone calls basically throughout the United States. And although they didn't have access to, say, the voice information, such as the NSA at the time, through Promise and Carnivore software, and that's going to be key. We'll get to that in a second. They did have associations. In other words, numbers that were calling one another, how long they were calling one another, and they were able to infiltrate all sorts of intelligence networks from the Secret Service down the line. And again, that's in Fabled Enemies. People can check that out for free. Now, fast forward to Robert Maxwell, super spy and media magnate. You know, there's books out there. His daughter is the main procurer for Epstein. Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell, I mean, you can read, there are several books on it now, but his connections to the Mossad and the state of Israel are absolutely undeniable. And he's actually the one who is alleged to have stolen that Promise software I just discussed, which was U.S. intelligence software to basically screen for keywords, terrorist words. They said it was like bomb or whatever to keep up on people. Stole that intelligence and presumably, if he was Israeli Mossad, gave it to them. So this Junkerman could just be the next level of that type of big data intelligence gathering in this track trace database society we live in.
Loads and loads of tweets on this. I suggest people go to Twitter where it says search Twitter. It's Richie Allen Show, all one word, so you can see what people are tweeting to me in real time, if I can say that. Follow Jason, thousands of followers on Twitter. It's at Jason Bermas, Bermas. Info Warrior is the YouTube channel, which is absolutely brilliant, folks. You know, you're dealing with a guy, Jason, I shouldn't say a guy, a journalist who is reporting on this stuff, but using facts to support his contention, his assertions. This is really, really great stuff. Yeah, Junkerman is an interesting one. I'm delighted that you've got Johnny coming on the programme. You might know Johnny I don't know how long you know Johnny or how you came across him, but that's a brilliant bit of research by Johnny Vedmore there. So what about Robert Maxwell then? He most people in the UK, Jason, will remember him as a guy who used to publish the Daily Mirror, and you know, he was very wealthy and he died. He fell off his boat, but I mean, he was far more than that, wasn't he? Far more.
Yeah, it really seems like he was far more. And even falling off that boat, did he have a heart attack? Did he drown? The autopsy's not very clear on that. He had all sorts of connections, and that would make sense. We know that intelligence, you know, across the board from the Mossad to the CIA is interested in controlling the narrative and controlling the media. And, you know, again, it would be hard-pressed for them to admit that, but there was a huge ceremony in Israel after the guy died where it was said that he had done more for the nation that could ever be said. On top of that, the boat in which this incident happened was named after his daughter. And then you look at the fact that even Alan Dershowitz, who, you know, we can't believe, but I've got into Dershowitz at length previously to this, even his connections to Assange as a lawyer, et cetera, we have to look at everything, right? Yeah. He claims in court that he was introduced to Jeffrey Epstein at the same time as Ghislaine Maxwell by the Lady Rothschild. And you wonder why there's all these conspiracy theories about the Rothschild.
And that's on the record, Jason, isn't it? That he was introduced by Lady Rothschild. That's on the record. That isn't conjecture. It's fact. He said,
yeah, that's in his deposition in court against Bradley Edwards, one of the men who actually beat Epstein this year. In fact, it might have been in December or February, but basically Bradley Edwards, when he initially was representing all of these women, Dershowitz and others came at him so hard they wanted him disbarred. You know, they try to discredit these people, but they went after specifically the lawyers, and in a lawsuit, Epstein sued him and another lawyer. So about a year later, he turns the tables. He countersues Epstein. This ensues for another 8 years, so almost a decade goes by. And finally, a judge says, you know what? It's enough. We're going to have this trial. And on the day they were picking jurors, Epstein folded, paid Bradley Edwards, who's still representing a lot of these women, by the way, an undisclosed amount of money, and had to give up a written statement where he essentially said that Edwards had done his job right and diligently, had never been deceptive, and Epstein used unjust and illegal acts against him. I don't want to misquote it, but it's out there. It's about a paragraph long. It's unbelievable. This story is so bizarre. So I don't even have all of the Dershowitz testimony. A lot of this stuff is leaking out. But in that testimony, it's also talked about, everybody thinks that we have all the flight logs, Richie. We don't.
We don't.
Okay, we have partial flight logs from one pilot on one vessel. We know at least of one other helicopter, if not two, and there's possibly another private jet. There's two other confirmed pilots that we have no records from. Last night during a AMA live stream, somebody brought to my attention, they had given me a PDF file with about 819 pages of depositions that Bradley Edwards, while interviewing one of these pilots, asked whether he had piloted 3 12-year-old girls from France who did not speak English to Epstein on his island and then flown them back the very same night.
It's sickening that, Jason, when you hear that. How could he do that without blowing the whistle? How could he not call the police? How could he not call somebody? I hate that. I know that might be an aside to the overall bigger issues we're talking about, but how could you do that? How could you deliver the children to him?
It's mind-boggling, but when you read these different lawsuits, for instance, I believe Jane Doe 43, not only right now in these indictments, we have 3 employees that are absolutely working with the prosecution against Epstein. I would assume that those names are possibly Sarah Kalin, who is named in one of these lawsuits, Leslie Groff, who is named in one of these lawsuits, and I believe the other one's name is Natasha Malashev, although there's a Marcinkova woman who's named in other lawsuits. Many of these people are named, okay? And while these things were going on back in 2008, 2009, many of them were actually given new identities, even then, Richie. So aside from that, in these allegations by Jane Doe 43, and Edwards is the lawyer in this, I believe, it talks about butlers, housemaids, servants, all signing non-disclosure agreements, all being a part of this operation, all contacting Epstein's lawyers whenever contacted by law enforcement. I mean, this stuff is in black and white. And again, that's why I think my channel is pretty important. It's not just me talking. I show the people
You've got this stuff
as
there.
we go over it.
That's really important. If you haven't checked out InfoWarrior on YouTube, like I said earlier on, Jason is backing up these claims. What he's found, he's backing it up by displaying for you, the viewer, the actual comments, the newspaper articles, the depositions. It's all there. It's really terrific stuff. I can't endorse it highly enough. We'll move away from Epstein in a minute. We'll talk a little bit about Iran. Jason Bermas is our guest. Wasn't that a bombshell interview on... Well, it was for me, Jason. I know you were much more across this story than I am. But on Saturday, Detective Michael Fiston, who was employed by Brad Edwards, of course, to investigate this, his interview on CNN was incredible, saying that children who looked very young, saying that Epstein lost interest in the girls when they basically lost their braces. This is just unbelievable stuff. And not unbelievable, but it's bombshell stuff on CNN. And you wonder, what are the American public making of it as they're watching that stuff? And at the same time, you've got Trump supporters on the one hand screaming abuse, saying, it's got nothing to do with Donald Trump, it's all lies, Trump never met him. You've got people who are Democrats or liberals saying, this is all a nonsense about the Clintons and about Hillary. It seems to me, Jason, that Jeffrey Epstein had intimate relationships with every caliber of politician, whether they were on the right or on the left. Let's be honest about it. And why don't Trump supporters just say, okay, he has had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. He did know him very well. He did spend time with him. He was on the plane. He was in his apartment in Manhattan. Why are they so stubborn about it? Why don't they just accept it?
You know what? It's tough for me to understand too. I don't understand it. When I got into this game, it was never about right and left.
No.
We didn't pick sides. I wasn't part of a team baseball, and the cognitive dissonance is over the top. For instance, the allegation that he broke it off at Mar-a-Lago, right?
Yeah.
Well, that actually comes from one of the victims. And in the same breath, that victim says that, yes, Trump was on the plane, on Epstein's plane, by the way, with her and Ghislaine Maxwell at the time, and Melania. Now, aside from that, we have the Vanity Fair report where, and this came out long before any of the scandal, where Trump is quoted as saying, you broke the cardinal rule, Jeffrey. You were late for someone else's plane, and him and Ghislaine got on there with he and Melania. Now, there's a report out there. I believe the guy's name is Jeffrey Horander. I might be butchering his last name. But essentially, this guy is a Florida businessman that says that he set up a party at Mar-a-Lago with Epstein and Trump and 28 women of age, which is fine. I have no problem with that.
No.
The problem is in the press, though, Richie, is that he's claiming this is the first time that Trump met Melania, which would make sense, kind of an audition tape for Wife 3. If you can't understand that you elected a guy who was 3 times married, always cheated on his wife, always bragged about his sexual prowess, ran beauty pageants. If you didn't know he was a misogynist, I don't know how blind you were. He was leaps and bounds better than Hillary Clinton. But then on the flip side, you have the liberals that won't talk about the Clinton relationship and how his lawyers, aside from Clinton being on the plane all the time, 26 times at least, even though some of those trips may have been several times on his plane, fine, we'll go there. His lawyers are claiming that the Clinton initiative was started by Epstein, which would also make sense. So this guy was heavily embedded with a lot of these people. I do believe Trump broke off the relationship, as people said, but to not acknowledge there was a previous one only does yourself harm, and it only makes you look stupid in the long run.
I'm going to, do you know what I think? I think he's going to walk, or something might happen to him. Now, I never make those types of, I never speculate like that. I'm not one of those, I don't believe in being sensational, like yourself, Jason, but I think because you're looking at the royal family, you're looking at the Clintons, you're looking at Trump, you're looking at so many more people. Like you said, you made a brilliant point there. We don't have all the logs. He can't be allowed to talk, and I think he'll either walk and he'll go somewhere and we'll never see him again, or he'll have a fit of he'll have a fit of guilty conscience or something, and he'll hang himself or he'll slit his wrist. That's what I think.
I certainly, that seems to be the prevailing opinion, but I'm not so sure. Let's see how far everything goes. Let me give you another example. Obviously, in your country, Prince Andrew and Epstein's relationship has been a focus, and it should be. That girl, she was, I believe, 16 years old, allegedly, when these relationships started. Yeah. But what people aren't talking about is the fact, again, Prince Andrew was the main arms dealer, okay? And this all ties back to, big business, war, arms dealing. If he was working for Khashoggi, arms dealer. If he was working with Prince Andrew, arms dealer. Yeah. And then you have Trump's relationship with Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew was another friend of his at Mar-a-Lago. He never broke those ties. And in fact, in his recent trip to the United Kingdom, it was Prince Andrew he was golfing with and hanging out with. He was basically his concierge. So he never broke that either. This is a guy who is also accused of being a pedophile, Richie. So the system works in very, very weird ways. People like to put their blinders on when it's their favorite person at work. But what is Trump doing? Are we just going to take down Epstein and the entire network walks free? Or are we going to start seeing some other big names? First of all, he didn't get bail. He's not getting bail. I found it shocking that days later, celebrity pedo R. Kelly got picked up, and he got picked up by Homeland Security. He also did not get bail. If we have another couple of these high-profile arrests, maybe this is the change we've been looking for. This guy spouted off on taking on the deep state. I'm no fan of Pompeo. I'm no fan of Bolton. I'm no fan of Haspel. But I got to tell you, arresting Jeffrey Epstein is a good start. And if we can somehow de-escalate this Iran stuff, maybe he gets my vote in 2020. Let's talk about Iran. Let me remind our listeners, we've got Jason Bermas on the show today, and I'm genuinely thrilled about that. Delighted that Jason came on. You can follow him on YouTube. It's Info Warrior. His films are excellent. Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, Shade, of course, and the Loose Change series. You've... Look, Jason, because of the work you've done, you've interviewed hundreds, thousands of men and women, insiders, intelligence people. Your films are outstanding. So what we're seeing happen with Iran at the moment, none of this is any great surprise to you. You'd have put your house, you'd have put every possession you had a few years ago on us being here right now. You knew this was coming, right? Well, let me say this. There was a couple things, every once in a while we get a curveball, right? We're talking about Epstein now, but at the end of the Obama administration, there were a couple curveballs. First of all, he commuted Chelsea Manning's sentence. And I thought I was like, well, I wasn't ready for that. I thought Chelsea Manning was going to be rotting in jail forever. And then this Iran deal gets signed. And for the first time in a very long time, it seemed like at least there wasn't going to be that rhetoric against a nation of 80 million people, a very first world type nation, one with a military, one that will be backed by Russia. And then you get this administration in there, and there's the hope. One of the reasons I voted for Trump, we're going to get out of Afghanistan. Yeah. We're going to get out of Iraq. I didn't want to go to Syria, et cetera, et cetera. And then he starts appointing people to his cabinet. Monsters like James Mattis.
Lunatics.
I mean, ugh. And then, Bolton, another one. And, this guy Pompeo, not great. But he does work out some diplomacy with North Korea, and that's still going on. So, again, I'm a guy that doesn't see black and white. I'll give credit where credit is due. I truly think the guy thought he was coming in with a Superman cape and he was going to save the world. Instead, he gets hit with this bogus Russiagate thing, which is very real in my country. People really do think that the Russians have influenced our elections and hacked the DNC and all that nonsense, despite all the evidence pointing towards an insider, a.k.a. Seth Rich. We now have new documents. In fact, I covered that this week that say that Seth Rich and his brother Aaron actually not only set up the Dropbox to give that information to Assange, which is what Seymour Hersh said in a privately recorded phone call. No one wants to talk about that either. No one even acknowledges that phone call exists in this country. Okay. And that they were paid through an eBay payment for those documents, that he had given them samples. Did an entire video on that. My country still believes Russia, Russia, Russia. And especially the left. They think that he's a Putin puppet. So in that respect, I get it. You were just part of a Brennan Clapper operation with Mueller to try to take you down illegitimately. Okay, you're preoccupied. But now, with this escalation in Iran with the drone shoot down, I got news for you, folks. That drone flies at 60,000 feet. It never got shot down before. It hasn't been shot down since. They wanted that drone shot down. They put it in their airspace. They put it low. What people aren't focusing on is that both Trump and Pence on TV several times have talked about the fact that there was actually a Navy vessel. Okay, so a Navy plane with 35 lives at least on there, and Iran talked about this, again, didn't make much press here, that they didn't shoot down the plane with 35 people in it that was also in their airspace. Now, on this side of the fence, they'll lie and say, well, that drone and that plane weren't in their airspace. We know that's nonsense. Of course they were. And had Iran taken the bait there, it would have been, full-on conflict. They didn't. But again, what do you have? You have a limpet mine attack, right? No proof anybody actually put the limpet mines there. Somehow we missed that. We don't have the video of it. But we have this grainy video and some photographs of what appears to be the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on a reconnaissance mission to take the other limpet off. But somehow that proves that they tried to blow that ship up. Prior to that, we had the attack of 4 drone attacks that didn't kill anybody and no oil was lost, but Iran. I think a lot of people sort of see through those lies here, but we don't even have a quote unquote left anymore in this country, Richie, that's anti-war like they were during the Bush administration.
No, you don't. And that's incredible. And we could do a whole program on that. We do not. We have bizarre interviews. I watched Mike Pompeo speaking with the Fox News morning team, those two goons and that woman that I can't name them, absolute goons. And Fox seemed to be pissed off with Pompeo. They're annoyed. They're saying, Iran thinks that Iran can do what it wants because we didn't punish it for shooting down the drone. I mean, that's what you've got in the US, and we've got it here. You've got warmongering presenters demanding action. Let's get the jets in the sky bombing targets inside Iran. Except, Jason, Iran is no paper tiger. It's not Iraq and it's not Afghanistan. Iran can defend itself, and it can defend itself very aggressively, right?
Well, yeah, listen, a lot of people don't understand. This isn't going to be just a shock and awe campaign, and then all of a sudden we take it over and we lose some lives with an occupation with boots on the ground. Russia's not going to let that happen. This is 80 million people with a real air force, with a real defense system. Don't get me wrong, ours is absolutely superior, but at some point you're going to have ground soldiers, and it's not going to be 3,000 or 4,000 soldiers sacrificed over a 10-year period. That's going to be over possibly, a week or a month's time with heavy battle. And, a lot of people don't want to hear that, but a lot of people are so ignorant that they don't know where Iran is on a map. They don't understand the geosignificance of the Eurasian region and how people like Wesley Clark blew the whistle years ago that it was really in a 5-year plan that they wanted to take regions like that, Syria and Iraq down. And listen, they're on a long game. These guys are still in power. The neocons of the world, the Cheneys of the world, they haven't necessarily lost power. The military-industrial complex moves on, Richie, and they want to dominate that region, period.
And it's a long game. This is the thing. Have you been, and criticism, of course, of what's happening. 2 questions. I want to talk about the Israeli influence here and in the United States. I mean, it's destroyed Jeremy Corbyn here, the Labour Party leader. He's supposed to be an old anti-war lefty, but he's collapsing in the face of claims of anti-Semitism, which I believe are a nonsense. And I want to talk about that in a second. Back to Trump, though. I really admire your honesty. I could totally understand why people voted for Trump. If I was in the United States and if I was voting, I would have been delighted to hear Donald talk about, let's get rid of interventionism, let's stop this policeman of the world nonsense, let's go back to trying to make things good for people at home and jobs and all that. I would have voted for it too. I really admire your honesty. So what happens with Trump then? Was Trump chosen because of his exposure to paedophilia? Was he chosen because you can bring him into a room and show him the real Zapruder film? I'm not trying to be funny in saying that. Is that what it is then? Is the Epstein thing exposing how leaders, political leaders, and how business leaders get to the top because they have exposure, Jason?
That's a tough call. For me, one of the litmus tests of whether or not this guy was really going to be able to do anything to the quote-unquote deep state prior to all this Epstein stuff is that he twice, you mentioned JFK, he twice promised us all those documents, and he twice failed. He said, we're finally going to declassify them, and he's like, all right, in 6 months. And then the day came, and no, that didn't happen either. There were large dumps. There was some really great new information. I did some videos on it. That's obviously a subject I don't want to get into because it's so extensive. Yeah. But he couldn't even expose the deep state of 50 plus years ago. That tells you something. The power of these people. Now, to talk about the Israeli influence real quick, you couldn't have a president that was more pro-Israel. It appalls me. The way that he's treated the Gaza region. And he said, you know what, the Golan Heights is yours. Nobody else dares do it, but I'll do it, and I'll move the capital, and that's where the embassy's going, and it's Jerusalem. And so much so that the Israelis have actually made a coin for the guy. I mean, you couldn't have a more pro-Israel president. Now, on top of that, when you were talking about Pompeo, for instance, Pompeo's a guy who gets a standing ovation when he talks about being the head of the CIA. I play the video all the time, how he lied, he cheated, he stole, and how there were entire courses on it. He's laughing, the crowd's into it, and they love it. And I'm thinking to myself, my God, these are the people on TV. I mean, Pompeo is the one on Fox News literally saying that Iran lying to the world is in their nature. I have you on tape bragging about how you cheat, steal, and lie, sir, and you headed up that organization. I mean, that is beyond reason that people can't see through that.
I missed the trick today. I missed the trick today, Jason, because I've seen that. I've seen it through you. And I was playing some of the audio today on the in the monologue segment of Pompeo this morning, lying through his teeth about Iran, saying that the Iranians have been, for 40 years, they're creating terror around the world. It's all lies. And I missed the trick. I should have used some of that audio of Pompeo. I'm slapping myself in the face now for not using it. But you're absolutely right. This guy is a pathological liar, has bragged about it. I want to just remind our listeners, because we've got about 10 minutes left, you and me, today. It's flown by. Jason Bermas is our guest, folks. I know you know who he is, but if he's new to you, and he might very well be, go and watch his films. Get onto YouTube and subscribe to his brilliant channel, Info Warrior, on YouTube. There's only one Jason Bermas, and as he said earlier on, several times a day he does brilliant reports, and it's brilliant that you do so many of them, because it's a wonderful antidote to the crap of the mainstream media. Just give us a quick comment on the capitulation of Jeremy Corbyn. the Labour leader, who, very much pro-Palestine, very much anti-apartheid South Africa, anti-apartheid Israel, and he's just collapsed in the face of accusations that he's somehow anti-Semitic. Are you following that, Jason, with any interest what's happening here?
Yeah, well, you know what? He folded on 9/11 Truth.
Of course,
a lot of people don't realize, back in the day, 2003, 2004, he was asking real questions about 9/11 and taking flack in the media for it. And I was surprised to see him rise up to the ranks where he did, but you notice he stopped talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've seen him fold before. It doesn't shock me. We both know, AIPAC in this country and Israel over there, they're a huge influence. For instance, talking about Pompeo just one more time, there's a clip out there of Pompeo saying anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And to me, at this point, when you look at what Zionism is, it's not even what it was initially envisioned to be. It's essentially, global domination, and at least domination over that region. Basically, full domination of the entire region of Palestine. Nothing left, whatever they want to do. Forget about just the expansion of these settlements, total military dominance. That's what Zionism is to me, and I can't get down with that when they're talking about taking military action against Iran, when they're taking military action against Yemen, when they're taking military action with us against Syria. No, thank you. So if I'm against that, somehow I'm anti-Semitic because I don't want to see brown people get bombed and killed. That's insanity to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Trump talks about, again, you wonder about the supporters and the cognitive dissonance. You talk on the one hand, Pompeo on Fox News this morning spent the first 5 minutes of that interview talking about the need to keep out, immigrants and migrants and migrant workers, and then the need to talking about refugees. And you think, well, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, that's just three. Syria now, we know about the intelligence agency's part in funding and arming and training ISIS. When will people wake up to it? You've got a migrant problem in Europe and elsewhere because our countries, France, Israel, the UK and the United States, are constantly undermining the rule of law in those countries and funding terrorist groups. It's crazy, Jason. Do you feel like screaming some days? You come to the microphone in your brilliant broadcast, do you feel like just throwing up or screaming or just saying, that's it, I'm finished, I'm just going to give up because people can't see the woods for the trees?
I do scream a lot every once in a while because it does kind of drive me nuts every once in a while. You got to, because it's just so mind-blowing. But, I came across something that I had never come across this year. It's before I went full-time on my own channel, but it's on my channel. They can go down. And it's the guy who sold us bin Laden. Because when you were talking about funding both networks, I think this is really important. A guy named Yosef Bodansky, who, yes, a dual Israeli citizen, head of all these counterterrorism groups in the United States back in the 90s. And in 1999, Yosef Bodansky literally writes the book on bin Laden. Okay, so he's on with, I believe it's Brian Lamb on C-SPAN, talking about the book, talking about the threat of bin Laden. In the first 10, 15 minutes, he's already making connections to Iraq and Iran that we know are not there, still pushing that narrative even before 9/11. And somebody calls in and actually asks him, well, didn't we fund the Mujahideen and the bin Laden network when it was convenient towards us? And he also talked about Kosovo, I believe, and Bosnia. And he goes, well, when it's in our interests, of course we're going to, do this. So right there, the guy who's selling us the boogeyman 2 years before these major terror attacks is admitting that the system funds terror when it's convenient to them.
Did Osama bin Laden die in the late fall, early winter of 2001? He did, didn't he? Fox News reported it. He did die, didn't he?
So tough to tell when. And, one of the things I like to focus on is no matter when you think he died, there were reports in December right after that the day after 9/11, bin Laden was in a Pakistani hospital. Staff saw him there. He was being protected by the military there. We know the Pakistani ISI through General Mahmoud Ahmed, and basically the wire transfer came from Omar Sheikh Sayed, and that's the guy who beheaded Daniel Pearl. He ended up getting convicted of that and executed. However, Mahmoud Ahmed, nothing ever happens to him. He's meeting with Bob Graham and Porter Goss on the morning of 9/11, and according to the report, $500,000. So if he gave $100,000, that's 1/5 of the funding. He's meeting with Porter Goss. He later becomes the head of the CIA, and Bob Graham. They do the initial congressional investigation into 9/11. None of this is brought up, and in the days after 9/11, our good friend Joe Biden, Joey B, is bragging about meetings with General Mahmoud Ahmed, how he's the first or at least the second most powerful person in Pakistan, and he's going to work with us in the war on terror.
Imagine that. Joe Biden, the favorite for some to win the Democratic nomination, although maybe
no chance.
There's no chance.
I think we're trying to push that guy. Listen, first of all, he's decrepit. He's a liar. If anybody had any sense and wanted to take him down, everything I said should take him down.
He sounds perfect, though.
One of the main funders of 9/11 in the days after, and cut a deal, and then bragged about it on the Senate floor and on television.
Do you know what, Jason?
Just like the rest of these guys.
Of course, maybe he's perfect then for the gig. I mean, again, with that exposure that we kind of talked about earlier on, it's coming up for a minute to. It's coming up for 11 minutes to the top of the hour. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left. It's been brilliant having you on today, and I mean that. Thanks for sharing your time with us, Jason. One of the things that we love are the films, and you might have hinted earlier on, you've got a real understanding of that medium and putting this stuff together in a feature documentary. Can we expect more of that from you in the future?
Man, I sure hope so. It's so tough. I produce my everything. So when you're watching me, I'm doing this live. I've got 4 monitors in front of me. I do my own thumbnails in my films. I do my own graphics. I use the Adobe suite. So really, I went to college for Photoshop and editing and 3D modeling and stuff like that. I went kind of down the editing route, obviously, and lucky enough to get into the film arena when I did. There's a couple subjects, obviously Epstein. I'm big on NXIVM, and I've always wanted to do a documentary on mind control. The folks over at TruthStream Media, Aaron and Melissa Dykes, have done an amazing film called The Minds of Men, which is 3 hours and 42 minutes. It's great, but I'd like to get a 90-minute, maybe 2-hour doco out there that really flows, that can break down not only the aspects of government mind control, but the aspects of how the media, military, industrial complex that's basically become a technopoly brainwashes us every day, Richie.
Yeah, no doubt. And Neil Sanders has been on this program talking about this stuff. He's got a documentary coming out, Neil, very soon with Rick, who is a great friend of the programs as well. Richard Willett, who was on the program the other night. They're really interesting guys as well, doing this sort of stuff. I'm sure you know who these guys are. You'd be fascinating to see you hook up with them. Jason Bermas has been our guest. We've got a couple of minutes left. I've been asked to put it to you about the 4 horsewomen of the apocalypse. Any of these women, any good, Ilhan Omar, any of these women, Ocasio-Cortez, apart from the virtue signalling, is there anything that is positive about these women? I mean, particularly in speaking out about Israel and stuff. What do you think?
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm glad you said that. Ilhan Omar is one of the only people speaking out against war aggression. So is Ocasio-Cortez. Ocasio-Cortez is one of the only people talking about corporations and stopping the abuse of big pharma, et cetera, et cetera. They have their moments. But both of those women are basically casting calls. They aren't career politicians. They're somebody that showed up to a large Democratic organization with thousands of others and were handpicked not only, because of their positions, but let's be honest, because of their aesthetic values, their looks. I can agree with Elizabeth Warren on trying to break up the tech monopolies. That's about it. I think we have to take people by their points and get aggressive when they're being disingenuous and they won't go into there. Even with people I like Tulsi Gabbard. I'm not happy she's on the CFR. I don't like her position on weapons. I don't like her position on torture. And I don't like how she started the debates talking about Al-Qaeda and 9/11.
Do you know what it is? I think they're virtue signaling, but not in the way that we see on social media. They're basically letting the establishment know, don't worry, we're not really dangerous. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Yeah. Well, don't worry about us. We're not really dangerous. Jason, do me a favor. Would you come back on to talk about MK Ultra and stuff like that? Maybe in the early fall. Of course, you say fall, you bloody Philistine. It's the autumn, of course. Will you come on in the autumn and talk to us? I'd love to have you back on again, Jason. It's been a fantastic 45, 50 minutes today. Come back again, please.
100%. I can't wait to do it. This was a pleasure. And thank you for everything you do, man. And all you people out there, all my stuff is for free. Download it, share the links. In the playlist are all my documentaries: Shade the Motion Picture, Invisible Empire, and New World Order Defined, Loose Change Final Cut, and Fabled Enemies. I think they all have great information. So share them as much as you can, guys, because it's about the information.
It is about the information. But when you do watch Jason's films, if you've got a couple of bucks to spare, if you can't afford it, do send him a couple of bucks. It's as simple as that, because if you don't, he won't make a film about MK Ultra and mind control, and we'd love to see that. Mate, thanks for doing it, Jason. It's been a pleasure, mate. You've made my week. Thanks so much, and please come back again. It's Info Warrior on YouTube. Subscribe to Jason if you haven't before. You're a top man, my friend. Speak again real soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. The brilliant Jason Bermas, live on the Richie Allen Show, live from New York City today. That's made my week, that. Hugely important for me, seeing the Loose Change films, and I don't know why we didn't connect before, but I just came across him on Twitter and my eyes lit up when I saw he was on Twitter. Oh, look who it is, and I invited him on, and I'm thrilled that he came on the programme. Right, we're coming up for about 5.5 minutes to the top of the hour. Got a tremendous programme tomorrow. I've got some terrific guests. Jason kicked it off today. Maggie Oliver will be on the Richie Allen Show tomorrow. I can't wait to speak with Maggie. She was on the programme back in 2017. The amazing work that she did, standing up to, let's be honest about it, roadblocks and I would say corruption in the police. This great detective who had the gumption, who had the cojones to stand up for the victims of the grooming gangs up here in the Northwest. Maggie Oliver's book is out, and she's agreed to come on with me again tomorrow, so she's on the programme. We'll also talk tomorrow about basically what I talked about in the monologue, the verdict in the case of Carl Beach, known as Nick today, found guilty of 12 counts of perverting the course of justice. Going to talk about that with Michael Shrimpton, the former esteemed barrister, the author of Spy Hunter. He'll be on the programme. Dean Henderson's got a book out. Dean will join the programme later on in the week as well. Got some brilliant stuff coming up for you on this programme. Your programme, by the way. It is your programme, your Richie Allen Show, and I don't often do this, but while I thought of it, have a listen to this for 10 seconds.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Right, couldn't be simpler. That's it for the programme. Thanks to you for listening. Again, 1,000 thanks to Jason Bermas. What a legend. For coming on the programme today. Go to Info Warrior on YouTube. Put Jason Bermas, Bermas, Info Warrior. Subscribe to him. Watch those films. He's absolutely brilliant. Going to close out the programme with some Bob Seger. This is Hollywood Nights on your Richie Allen Show. I'll try not to headbutt the microphone again. Getting carried away with myself, you see. Have a brilliant rest of your Monday. See you tomorrow. Bye now.